Hey, hello, this is Jonathan van der Waard from the Netherlands, and in this tutorial I want to show you how to collect data from the International Movie Database into Power BI. The International Movie Database is a website that you might be familiar with that has lots of information about movies, TV series, actors, composers, and all that stuff. I have a list of composers that I really like, and what I want to do is collect all the information of the movies, series, and everything that they worked on, and bring that over to Power BI. So let's have a look at my list and see how to approach this. This is what my list looks like. It's basically a one-column table with composers, people that created fantastic music for the best movies in the world. And I want to see what movies they created this music for and some detail about these movies. So let's see how we should approach this. In this video, I will go over the following topics. First, we'll go to the IMDb website and understand what it is that we actually want to collect. Secondly, we want to collect that data then in Power Query and leverage the web function. Thirdly, I will go over another approach to get the title IDs that enable us to collect data about the titles later on. Again, using the web function in Power Query. And then as a last step, we will leverage an API that exists to collect details about movie titles and leverage the OMDB API. So what's in scope for this video? Well, we want to collect data for persons. In this case, I'm looking at composers. You could do the same though for actors, directors, writers. So it's about individuals. We want to collect the roles. So some of those people, they will be a composer, also worked on soundtracks, worked in the music department. So they have different roles for different movies. Then I want to collect all the titles. And last but not least, all the details of the titles. Also to manage the right expectations, what is not in scope? So not in scope is data modeling and report building. In this video, I'm really focusing on how to collect the data in the first place. I hope and I expect that you are familiar with some data modeling and report building and can use this video as a first step to create some great reports. I'm already looking forward to what you will make of it. Okay, so high level, this is the approach. We start with the input list. We manually find the code for the people that are in the list. So this won't work for a super long list, but as long as the number of records is about 20, this is fine to do. It's just picking up one code that is difficult to automate. Then for each of those individuals, get the roles and titles that they worked on, and then get the title IDs that they worked on as well. That will be a separate step, is what we will see. But as soon as we have the title ID, we can actually collect lots of information about that title. And we use the OMDB API data for this. All right, so why don't we go over to the imdb.com website and have a look. All right, so here we are on the imdb.com website, and let's search for one of our composers, and I suggest we do Hans Zimmer. That's him. And what happens is that the page for Hans Zimmer opens, and one thing to note straight away is that there is a specific URL for Hans Zimmer. And this is good to know because there is a consistent logic in imdb.com. it's basically a URL that starts with imdb.com, then /name. Name is only used for individuals, so actors, composers, directors, etc. And then there is this suffix that basically refers to the link that I clicked on. We don't need that, but this first part, the part that I'm selecting now, is something that I want to copy, because this is what we need in Power BI in a minute. So Control C. Then let's have a very quick look at the page of Hans Zimmer. So the information that I want to collect from this page is basically the filmography, which consists of several roles, right? There are 9 of them that I'm interested in, and each of these roles has quite a lot of credits in the case of Hans Zimmer. So series, movies, and all of that stuff that he worked on. And what we want to try out in this video is to see if we can pull all of this information into Power BI, right? So it's about 9 roles, probably a bit close to 600-700 credits in total. So let's go over to Power BI and see what we can do. So I opened up Power BI and let's do the very first step and get some data in. So click this button, get data. Then under other, click web, connect. And this is where we paste that URL that we just copied, right? With this specific code that is there for Hans Zimmer. Okay. Okay, so what Power BI did is basically scan through that page and see what's in there and what could possibly be the data that we want to collect. Let's very briefly go through the tables that are there. So some basic information. This is the general information for Hans Zimmer. Some movies that because I scrolled through the page before this, recognize as the items in the thanks column, but there's no real role in this. I don't see where it fits in one of those 9 roles. There are some Oscars and stuff like that. Additional lists. And this is actually the one that I'm looking for to use, because it has those 9 roles that we just saw, and then the titles underneath, right? So that's great. That's what I want to use. So let's very quickly go over the others. No, not useful. No, neither is this one. And then additionally we have the HTML code and the text that is displayed on the page. Not very useful in my opinion, but we can use the table 5. Let's go for transform data and see what is in there. So this is what Power Query looks like. We have the role with the credits and the role by itself, which I think is a bit cleaner to have, and then the titles that fall under the role. This is correct. I did notice that The Simpsons belongs under the music department. June Part 2 belongs under the composer role. So that's great. What is not so great is that if we scroll all the way to the right, there are not so many titles, right? So I have 24 columns, and we saw that the first row had 146, if I'm not mistaken, credits, and that's not what we have. So just to briefly hop over to that part and show you, it goes down to Apollo, right? So 2019 Apollo. So we are on the right track, right? Because we have the first, what is it, about 10 or so titles, but I want a lot more. I want all of them for all roles. So we need to go back to Power Query and look at the advanced editor to see what is actually the code that is underneath this. So let's restructure this for a second. Okay, so I didn't change the code, I just changed the structure and spread it over a couple of lines so we can hopefully a little bit easier identify what is there. So as we can see in the first column, we get this role plus additional stuff. In column 2, we get the role. That's great. That's something that we want to have. And in column 3, we get the first long title. I call this long title because it's the title including the years and some additional stuff like how many episodes or whether it's in pre-production and stuff like that. And those are really the ones that I'm looking for. And then something to note as well. So it starts with title 1. So that's an odd child. And then the next one will be an even one. So where this is our title 1, this will be our second long title. And what I want to collect basically is a table that holds the roles and then additional columns for all the titles under these roles. In order to do that, we need to update the code here a bit and extend the code, because now it goes down to column 24, child 15, but as we have seen, there are lots of more children that we want to bring home as well. So let's update this code. I will do that in a second, and then share that in the notes below the video for you, so you could use it as well. Okay, so here we are, updated code. Let me briefly go over it. Source is still the same. We extract a table from HTML. What I've done is I kept the role and I kept the first long title, the second long title, and the third, etc. And I basically added more rows. So we saw that we only got a couple of children. I went all the way down to 500. There's no role for Hans Zimmer where he has 500 credits, but in my list there are others that come close to that number. So that's the number of rows that I added. I probably could have included a loop here just to go through the total number, but I didn't want to bother about that. Keep it simple, and also don't include the logic of the even and the odd numbers. So this is how I approach this. And then what I get as a result is basically the role with lots of columns and titles. I want to unpivot that and then remove the number title. So let's briefly have a look at what that looks like. So this is what's the end result, but we start with the source. We extract the table from it. This is what we saw before, but just in a cleaned version. I only have the titles, the long titles here. And as you can see already by the size of the scroll bar, I have lots more than 24. So that's great. We unpivot this so all the columns become a record. That's great. And then this column, the number column, I don't need. So let's remove that and really keep it to the bare minimum. All right, that's great. Let's see what's the next step. Let's go back to the imdb.com webpage. We could also get the short title and the year for this list. either by splitting it from the long title or collecting that as a separate step. We saw that in the initial code. So we can pull it from there if we want to. But what I want to collect as well is also information about the title that Hans Zimmer contributed to. So for example, if we click the Spider-Man movie, I want to collect information about this movie and see what are the directors that Hans Zimmer worked with, what are the writers that he worked with, the stars, and basically the information about, in this case, the Spider-Man movie. But I want to collect that for all the movies. So let's see how we can do that, right? And push it a bit further than we have so far. Because we have the name Spider-Man No Way Home, but we don't have the link yet. If I hover over this name, over this hyperlink, you see in the bottom left what is the location that I'm going to if I click this. And that is something that we need to keep in mind. And if we go to the first one, The Simpsons, you see in the bottom left, the very end part of that link is MSDP, which is an abbreviation for music department _1. The second one is MSDP _2, 3, 4, 5. So there is some consistent logic in there, and that's something that we want to leverage. All right, having said that, let's again copy the URL of this page for Hans Zimmer. If you don't have that still in your clipboard, select this part, Ctrl C, and let's go back to Power BI. Again, go for web. Paste in that URL again for Hans Zimmer. Click OK. And maybe you think, well, we have seen this, right? We have looked at all the options here, but there's actually one button at the bottom that we haven't clicked on. And that's what we're gonna do now. Add table using examples. And this is basically some AI that helps us to scrape the right information or the preferred information from this website. So what we want to have is basically something that we can link to what we already have, which is that long title, and then see if we can fetch that URL. So we start typing in the very first cell, which we know is The Simpsons, and then we go for the long title, which is this one. And in order to help Power BI, we need to create a pattern. And one suggestion is not a pattern yet. So we need to do the same for the second record. Something with God created us. How God created us. And then we click outside the second cell, and you see that Power BI recognizes a certain pattern, right? So the following records will be the extra records that are found under the music department. And let's see if we can link this up to the hyperlink that is there for these titles. So we saw that MSDP _1 was the last part of the first link for the Simpsons. I already see it. It's this one. And again, we provide some input in the second row as well. MSDP _2. this one. Click outside that second record, and there we go. We provide a pattern, and this is what Power BI makes of it. 3, 4, 5, all the way down. Great. Just one more step. Because if we scroll down, we see that Power BI has done this for the music department. But we know from the IMDb website for Hans Zimmer that there are actually 9 roles. Now we only have the very first role. So we go back to the page of Hans Zimmer and start look at the composer role as well. June part 2. And if I hover over this title, I see that the hyperlink that this refers to actually doesn't end with MSDP underscore and then a number. It's com, an abbreviation for composer, and then underscore 1, because this is the first record on the page, right? The same is there for the second, the son, com underscore 2, underscore 3, underscore 4. Great, so same kind of logic, but then with the com part at the end. Go back. We click on row number 147, start typing. We know this is the June one. June part 2. Let's go for the long title, which is this one. So including the year and including the pre-production part. And click outside the cell. After a little bit of waiting, we see that Power BI understood. We want to continue. So it's going all the way down to 705 records in total, which is really what we need, right? Because that's all the credits for all the 9 rows. We only need to help Power BI also understand the logic for column 2. So we know this ends with com underscore 1. Let's find that record somewhere at the bottom. Here we go. Click outside the cell. And with a little bit of waiting, this is what we got. So all the com records are there, and the great thing is now that it understands that we really want to have all the roles, it also continued with the URLs for actor, soundtrack, and all of the others. So great. Let's click OK. So Power BI created table 9 for us, something that was not there initially, but that we created customly. And let's have a brief look. Yeah, this is the long title and the URL. Let's click OK. Great. So here we have it, the long title. Might as well call that long title here. And then change column 2 as well to something like hyperlink. And now we can connect the two, right? Because we have the long title in table 9 and we have the long title in table 5. I used an underscore here, but you see what I mean? And this basically allows us to merge queries and combine the two. All right, let's see what is the next step that we can take in the next video. Okay, we have some basics down, but let's see if we can build this out to something that actually makes sense. Because what we've done so far is only do this for Hans Zimmer, and I have a list of composers and I want to do it for all of them. So we need to build functions for composers in a list. So let's first start with the list. So this is my list. For the people who have seen my Spotify video will recognize this list. I had this, well, almost the same list. I have 20 composers. I had 19 back then. And what I've done, and I don't think there is an automatic way to do this, is manually added the code, right? This code we already saw in previous minutes, but I think it is out for all the composers in my list. It's a bit of tedious work, but it's just 20 times searching and then picking up the code and put it in a table. So that's what I've done. Let me copy this list and enter some data in Power Query. This is where I paste it. Control V. Headers is great. This is my input data. All right. So what I want to do now is basically create a function that picks up this IMDb code, then runs the script of table 5, and also runs the script of table 9 for that code. Right? So instead of doing this for Hans Zimmer, I want to do that for all of them. All right. So in order to do that, we need to create a function for the tables that we have. And just for the sake of time, let me use some code that I already prepared for this. Right, so we create a new blank query, go to the advanced editor, and paste in my code. So this is what that will look like. Similar to the Spotify video, I used an input parameter, IMDb code as text. I use that in this part of the string of the web browser contents, and then the rest of it basically is the same as we've seen before, right? I unpivot, remove the column that I don't need, and that's the result. Great. So a function is created, and let's call this get role and long title. So that's function number 1. And then function number 2, again, new query, advanced editor, and I'll paste in some of my code. Okay, similar as the previous function, I want to have the IMDb code as an input parameter as text. Use that in the URL string, and then I've extended this HTML table stuff a little bit, so we have the long title, we saw that in the previous minutes, and the title link. I also included the short title and the year, so that they don't need to bother about sort of splitting that long title and collecting the year or the short title from there. Okay, let's click done. And let's call this get short title, long title, and year. All right, now we go over to the input data and let's see whether this works. So let's select the IMDb code, go to invoke custom function under the add column tab. Let's do the role first. IMDb code is indeed the input parameter that I want to use. Okay, so after a little bit of waiting, it created tables for all of my composers. Let's have a quick look what's in the table. Yeah, that's what I expected. Great. Let's continue and do the same for the other custom function. Short title, long title, and year, based on the IMDb code. Yes, please. Okay, great. And that's what we expected as well. Okay, at this stage, we bump into our first challenge. Because you could think, well, we could extend all the rows here. But what we will get is quite a bit of rows for John Williams and Hans Zimmer and all of that. So that will take a while. But what will happen is that for each of those rows, I will have this table, right? So I will completely blow up my table if I do that for all of them, having way more records than I need. So what we need to do first is make sure we join this table with the role with the second table that we have with the short title and the year. So let's create a custom column for this. And use the table join function. Table join. And then what we want to do is basically join our very first table. And we see that we need to provide a table and a key as input. So let's provide the key, because the key that we have in both of these tables is actually the long title, which in the first table, you see that at the bottom, is called long underscore title. And now we need to provide the second table, which is that get short title, long title, year one. And we need to provide the key for this second. And I wasn't that consistent in my approach because I used an underscore for the first one and just a space for the second one. Not that consistent, but well, in this case it shows which key comes from which table. So let's see whether this works. There's no syntax error, so let's click OK. So at my side, this took a few seconds. So a little bit of patience is needed here. But let's see what's the result. The result is basically the combination of the two tables. That's of course what we expected, but it's great to see that it worked. And that means that we don't need these columns anymore, right? So we can delete those, remove columns, and expand this one. What I will do is deselect the underscore long title. I don't need that in there twice, and I like the one with the space more. I don't like to use original column name either, so that's deselected, and then press OK. We have the long title, we have the short title, we have the year, and we have the link, which can be a starting point to start collect detailed data for each of those titles as well. So great starting point, and let's see how we can push this a little bit further in the next part of this video. All right, things are in good place, but we need a few additional steps. I added these steps already. We'll provide you with the code in the link under this video, and then briefly talk you through what I've added on top of what we had so far, right after we expanded that custom column. What I think we need to do is really get the title ID and get rid of the stuff that we don't need. So what I've done is basically do a transform column and then pick the text between the delimiters e / and before / question mark. Well, the year is a challenge every now and then, because the year is not literally a year, right? In some cases that is the case, but in some cases it's blank. And in some cases I get a range of years, and that won't really work if I want to display things on a timeline and work with the date column later on. So we need to fix this. And the thing is that even if there's not a year in my column here, there is actually a year in the long title. And that's exactly the reason why I picked the long title. You probably thought, well, why link two tables on such a long string? Well, yeah, now I hope you understand. I needed that long string anyways. I wanted one thing to link the two tables and not additional columns. So here you go. This is the reason. So we need to find some logic to still find a year, even if that's not available from what we pulled from IMDb so far, and get it from this string if it's there. So what I've done is building a bit of logic, basically to check if the year is not empty, then check if the year contains this dash. And if that's the case, then pick the text before that dash, right? So that will be my first year. And otherwise, pick the year that is before this / right? Because even that is there in the records. It's not that super consistent, but this is how I dealt with it. So this is my code to get the year from the long title. So if it's not there at all, then we need to find it here. We need to find the comma and pick the year from there. Again, code is in the comments. So that will basically lead to my first year, right? Or the year that we didn't find initially. And then I add an additional column that basically gives me the last year, right? In case there is only one year, that's the same as the first year. If there are multiple years, like this record of Star Wars The Clone Wars, I have 2008 as the first year and 2020 as my last year. All right, then what I think we should do is basically make sure that everything has the right data type. Do that for the text columns as well. And then what I usually do is add an index, right? So with this table, I want a unique identifier, preferably a numeric value. So that's what I added. And then as the very last step, I basically only want to get the information before the / There were some cases that had 2020 / and then the very first character of the title. And with just extracting the data before the delimiter, I really get the year in that case. So that's for this column. Okay, so that's it for cleaning this part. This is not input data anymore. This is, well, IMDb data. So Let's give that a proper name. We can get rid of table 5 and table 9. Those were just there to help us get started and explain a bit of the logic. So I'll delete these. Okay, so what we need to do as a next step is see if we can work with this title link. Right? Because you can imagine that if we use the same trick as we did with the composer, with the person, we can check if we can apply this trick on the title as well. The only thing is that we have lots and lots of titles now, because we already saw that Hans Zimmer had about 700 plus titles. John Williams will have even more titles, and there will be some others that have lots of titles. So this really takes some patience if we want to take that approach. So what I figured out after some researching on the web is finding out that there is an API that we can leverage here just to get some information for a title. Unfortunately, that API doesn't work for the name. So what we've done so far is really what we need to get to this point, and not possible through that API. But including the next API step, we will be able to pull some data from each of these titles. So let's look at that in the next part. Okay, for this step, we need to go to another web page. And the web page is called www.omdbapi.com. So not IMDb, OMDB API.com. And this is basically the place where you can start and request an API key for the information that we want to collect. It's not super secured, so please be a bit careful. I'm not hijacked myself yet, so I think it's okay-ish. But there's some information on what to do, and I will quickly guide you through what is there. And I think the key to look at, I always like examples. If you've seen my Spotify video, you will recognize that. So I think we should try out what it is if we enter a title, because we have a title ID now for lots of rows. And what is it that we get if we enter the title? And I've selected one, again, the Spider-Man one that we looked at before. And let's see what we can get if we search for this ID. If we search for this ID, then this will be the expected response. Yeah, so we'll get the full title, we'll get the year. Well, we already had that, but it doesn't hurt to sort of confirm we have the right one. We get the rating, release dates, all sorts of details, right? And the plot is in there, the votes and the rating that people gave on this one is there. So that's great. I want to get this information, and I want to get it for all the records that I have. The only thing is, if I scroll to above, this is where you collect your API key. Sorry, I did miss that here. But this is basically the way you do a request, right? You provide that URL and then enter your key here, and then add a title to it. So in order to request a key, you can provide your email address here and then get a key sent over. And you can go two routes, right? You can either go through the Patreon route, where you pay a little bit of money and then can get the API for lots of usage, or you can go for the free one, and then you need to be a bit more patient, right? Because there's a 1,000 daily limit, and we have a couple of thousand records. couple of thousand titles. Of course, you can think of using 2 email addresses to speed it up a bit. I'll let your own creativity work here a bit. But this is the way you collect an API key, and with that key we can work in Power BI. So see you in the next part. Okay, we're back at Power BI, Power Query. Let's start a new query. And as you know, I like to use some code and save some time, not write it out or bore you with all the details. This is the code that I want to use. And let me talk you through it quickly. So I want to create a function where I have a title ID as an input parameter. And then what we're going to do is try something out. And this is a functionality in the M code, which basically prevents all sorts of errors. I want to prevent the scenario that I'm at record 4944 and then something breaks, right? So I use the try and otherwise combination in Power BI and basically give me the text error back if something went wrong rather than breaking the process. It will continue in this case to the next record and not break, but let me know that something went wrong. So what we do is basically use that URL that we saw up until the I is, then use that title ID that we have as a parameter, and then provide the API key. In this case, I'm not showing my API key, but this is where you put that API key in. And with the otherwise, and then convert that to a table. So it's just that simple. Click OK. And let's see whether that works. I'll again try out that Spider-Man example that we looked at, invoke. And there we go. This is the information that we can get from the API. So we get the title, it's the short title, the year seems to be correct, 2021. I see the runtime, what genres there are, director, writers, actors, plot, lots of stuff. So this is amazing. This is what I want to get for all the titles that we looked at a few minutes ago, and it will be basically going to that table again and then call that function for the title link. So we go to add column, invoke a custom function, do the query one. We haven't really looked at a good name yet, but it's more about the concept than the detail here. Here we go, and let's look at let's first look at what is the record that we have here. The very first one is Star Wars Duel of the Fates, and let's see what's in that table. Duel of the Fates, great. We can expand the records. I would suggest to not use the original column name here. And there we are. Cool. So now we have lots of detail for all of the titles. There will be some records that we had in our original action, like the title and the year. We will get that through the API as well. you will see that some records are not available in the API. Most of them are, but there will be some null values here and there. Let's quickly have a look. Number 6. Star Wars is Harry Potter. That seems to not be available. Yeah, not much we can do about it, I guess. Alright, I will wrap this video up with some last comments and suggestions. It's time for a wrap up. Let's look at some last comments before we finish this video. So what have we done in this video? We looked at the web content in Power Query, and we took 2 approaches. We amended the table that Power BI recognized on the page and further extended that, and we also scraped some specific elements from the web page. Then we looked at functions to do that for a list of composers, joined 2 tables that came from the 2 functions that we created, and then also looked into the OMDB API, where we collected some further title details. Yeah, I think the main concern with this approach would still be performance. You might have noticed that I forwarded some of the recorded video here and there just to keep talking and not let you wait on my machine. In some cases that's just a few seconds, in other cases yeah, it went up to a minute or 2 sometimes. So yeah, I think the advice would be patient. Good stuff just takes time. We're not working with a full ETL in a data warehouse here. We're just working with Power BI, and I guess there are some limitations when it comes to performance. Scraping quite a complex website as well. So yeah, please keep that in mind. I think for the OMDB API, especially if you go through with the free approach, there are some limitations on how many requests you can do on a day. I think there will be a request already if you do this in Power Query, and then if you close and apply or refresh all, then that will probably be another request. So yeah, consider that, and don't be surprised if there is yeah, a break due to the 1000 limits. Yeah, the way to sort of circumvent this obviously is to work with a CSV step in between, where you just take the title IDs that you want to use. You could consider to split them out in smaller chunks, and then again be a bit patient and collect them step by step, maybe over a few days if you have lots of titles that you want to collect information for. I wanted to do this for 20 composers, so that's quite a bit of records. The question is, yeah, how relevant is that for a report? Maybe you want to just report for 1 composer and or 2, right, where you can compare the 2, but not yeah, that many records. That's also one of my suggestions. So we took the composer approach here just because I like it, and well, yeah, it aligns nicely with the Spotify video that I just did before this one. But you could look at actors. If you have a favorite actor, yeah, go ahead and pull information from the site for their name code. You could do the same for directors and writers. So yeah, there are quite a couple of options here. And if you just want to do it for 1 title, 1 movie, 1 TV series, obviously even the sort of starting approach will work. You don't need to work with the API there. But yeah, I'll leave that up to your own creativity, and yeah, hopefully at some point you will create something nice. And yeah, feel free to drop me a line or tag me, or yeah, just let me know whether this was helpful. This is my second video. Yeah, you could, because I almost used the same base data, yeah, see if you can combine the two, and yeah, create insights that show numbers on Spotify versus IMDb, that kind of stuff. I think there are lots of options there as well. So think about that, and yeah, I hope you have a lot of fun playing around with this. And that's about it. So thank you so much for watching it up until this point. If you have any comments or suggestions, things that can be improved, or where you have some builds on what I did, then please feel invited to reach out to me and share your views. I don't have any ideas for a third video at this moment, but if you have some suggestions, yeah, please feel invited to contact me and share your ideas. Thanks again. Cheers.